You're listening to the Naptime Empires podcast with my mom, Nikki Elledge Brown. Mom, your show's on.
Thanks, bud. I got it from here. Welcome to the Naptime Empires podcast, refreshingly honest conversations on the realities of parenthood and entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Nikki Elledge Brown. Let's get started. Allow me to introduce you to the fierce and fabulous Jen Kem. Jennifer Kem is the founder of Seen, Heard, Paid Live. I'm going to tell you more about that in just a second. And creator of the popular brand thought leadership program, MasterBrand. Also, the only launch implementation incubator in the business called Momentum Pro. MoPro for short. I love how she names things. For 18 years, Jen has been working with Fortune 500 companies like Verizon, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Oracle, and others to launch products and develop brand strategies using her proprietary and powerful brand archetype indicator mix, used by hundreds of marketing teams and entrepreneurs worldwide. She's worked with, yes, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, best-selling authors, celebrities, and speakers, and her passion is helping people create a legacy through aligning their values with their prosperity. She lives, works, plays, and slays in Honolulu, Hawaii with her husband, 3 kids, and 3 dogs. Plus me. Yes. Well, we don't actually live together, but we do like to hang out as often as we can. And Jen and I finally met online through our mutual biz buddy and frientor, Dan Martell, back in 2016, even though we've actually been living 10 minutes away from each other for years and just didn't realize it. So we're so excited to finally have biz buddies who we can hang out with on a regular basis on this little island in the middle of the Pacific. Fun fact, I'm going to be speaking at her event, her Seen, Heard, Paid Live event, which is coming up in Austin in April 2017 at the time I'm recording this. So I will leave a link below or in the show notes if there are tickets left at this time that we're recording in real time and you will be in driving or flying distance and you want to come hang out in Austin. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. So make sure you check out naptimeempires.com/020 for the show notes for this one. Now, we are moving from Hawaii to Texas soon, so my Aloha Fridays are numbered. But as often as Jen and I can, we meet up on Friday mornings while Bryson's at pre-K and Deacon's, well, it's usually before Deacon's nap, and we'll go for a walk at the harbor or around my neighborhood or just hang out and girl talk on the couch and catch up on whatever's going on. And I just love hearing her stories, her perspective, her wisdom on life, business, and all things in between. And she shares so much of that in this episode. Seriously, so much good stuff. I know I say that all the time. Just a little bit of what we actually cover in this conversation. What it's like having kids/friends in 2 seasons of life, because she had her daughters in her early 20s, and now she had her son in her late 30s. How she felt like a total weirdo growing up in Hawaii as a 5-year-old who would love to listen to Wayne Dyer and NPR. The story of how and why her first marriage deteriorated and what she learned from that in hindsight. How she made the shift from corporate executive to entrepreneur in the Bay Area to Honolulu. Right time, right place, right niche. Lessons from building and losing a multi-million-dollar brick-and-mortar empire in Hawaii and why she says she'll never do it again. How she went from, quote, baller status to being scared for her life. The power of the bounce-back muscle. Why focusing on self and personal development was the key for her. And quality over quantity. Making the choice to saying yes to having it all, yet knowing it doesn't all have to be equal. I really love what she has to say about this and all the realizations that she had between thinking that she could only pick. You know, you can pick 2. You can't have all these things. You can pick 2. So I love her reframe on that. And then one secret to success in her second marriage and transitioning to a blended family with teenagers and a baby. Again, there's so many just real life nuggets in here, and her story is fascinating, incredibly inspiring. You're in for a treat. Enjoy. All right, Jen Kem, it is very rare for me to actually be Zooming, Skyping, or any other kind of call with someone who's actually in my time zone. What? Oh, right? Awesome. I can't believe it took us this long to meet in person, but I'm glad that we did. Jen Kem is actually in Hawaii with me, people, in case you didn't put that together. So thank you so much for joining us and opening up to talk Naptime Empires. I know about your story because we talked about it at Nico's on the pier the other day, but I would love to kick off just by starting off and you kind of painting the family picture so that we can see, because you've actually kind of gone through a couple of Naptime Empire phases in your life. So tell us about your family and your kiddos and how your businesses have, come to be in the midst of all of that.
I love how you put that, because I didn't realize that I had gone through multiple phases of Naptime empires until I met you, Miss Awesome Nikki. And first, before I even jump in and even talk about me, I just want to say thank you for inviting me. And I'm so excited about what you're doing with this podcast, because I think it's so important, especially for those of us that are mompreneurs or trying to figure that all out. I think this is such a great resource. So thank you for inviting me to have this chat. So
my pleasure. I'm glad to have you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I have a very interesting story. I always tell people that I have two phases of friendships in my life with other women. And one phase is all of us who had kids when we were in our early 20s. And then there's the phase of gals who've had kids that are in their late 30s or early 40s. And the crazy thing about me is I'm in both categories. So I have a group of friends who can totally be babysitters to my 2-year-old. And then I have a group of friends who ask me if my daughters will be babysitters to their young ones. And so it's kind of cool, Exactly. And so my story is kind of interesting. I totally have that different seasons of life thing going on. I grew up in Hawaii, and very fish out of water, weirdo, alien. I like to call myself Jean Grey the mutant. I grew up in a really small town here in Hawaii, which again, we both live in, and we're able to run our companies from here, which is really cool. But growing up, I felt like a fish out of water. I didn't align or resonate with anyone around me, because I came straight out of my mother's womb wanting to build an empire. And I don't know where that came from, Nikki. I really don't. I literally was born ambitious, yet totally wanted to be everyone's friend. Like I was like, I want to bring all of you with me let's go help the world. And I had I was the kind of kid who was 5 years old, reading the newspaper in the morning with my grandma, listening to NPR on the radio on the way to babysitters when my parents would drop me off. And I would watch PBS, and not just Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but I was watching Wayne Dyer, like at 5 years old.
All right. Getting it early.
So I was like one of those weird kids, and my parents didn't really know what to do with me, but I had this really great vision, Nikki, that not only would I help people I didn't know what at the time. I just felt like I had a calling on my life, but I wanted to be a mom too. Like I was very clear, I'm going to be married by the time I'm 25. I'm going to have 2.5 kids, and I'm going to be, when I got a little bit older, around 10, I realized, I thought I wanted to work in the corporate world, because I just thought that was like a good job to have, right? Notice the air quotes that you can't see right now, but like good job to have.
Right.
And so I basically set my sights on doing that, Nikki, out of the gate. And so literally I did the good Asian girl thing, because I'm of Asian descent. And so I went to school, got top grades, went off to college on what we call the mainland. So for those of you who are not familiar with Hawaii people, we call like the continental US the mainland. And knew right away I definitely didn't want to go to school here. I wanted to, see the world. And so I went to school in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and then I got my MBA for Berkeley. And the crazy thing is that along the way, I also got married and quickly had one child, because I wanted to get it done, girl. I was like, I want to have my baby right away. So at 22, literally I was 4 months pregnant, getting my diploma for my bachelor's degree.
Oh, wow.
And was totally happy with it. I was like, yay, this is exactly what I wanted. I want to have my 2 kids before I'm 25. Like really, that was my thing. And I'm going to go and I'm going to climb the corporate ladder. And I never thought that would be hard. So I think that's kind of cool. But on the other hand, boy, when I really figured out what it was going to take, that was kind of a wake up call, right? It was like, oh, great. Because we had moved, to California. I got my career started in the corporate world in Silicon Valley during what I call the first Silicon Valley boom. And because I was so quote unquote ambitious, I was very clear. I'm like, I'm going to run Yahoo. Or now Marissa Meyer is doing that, but just imagine it probably would have been me had I not changed my direction.
Right.
But literally, like, that's what I always say, that because we're the same age, Marissa Meyer and I, and I'm like, oh, I would have totally been her. So anyway, but what I found out really early, Nikki, is that, oh my gosh, like trying to juggle being ambitious, being a good wife, and being, a good mother to my baby was like, oh, this isn't easy. This is pretty challenging. Although I was trying to be happy, I definitely felt the pressure, like, and I felt out of control, if that makes sense. Because, like I said, I had this clear vision of being in control, if you will. And then you have a baby and like you have no control. I'm clear that God puts women, you know, the people who push babies out, because we probably have the ability to flex and move around what's happening. But I got to say, like, I was totally coming in it, like thinking, oh, this is good. I've got everything structured. And yeah, babies don't, like, you try to put them in structure, but they've got their own intentions and things they need. And so I found out very early. So on one hand, I'm very grateful because I don't know if I would have had more kids later if Michaela, my oldest, hadn't given me the opportunity. She was a challenge girlfriend. She was the cutest baby and the loudest, like never stopped either crying, talking, yapping. Literally, she never not made a sound. And to be honest with you, Nikki, she's still the same. She's like just socialite, extrovert. So I also had to kind of like learn how to manage that and try to let her be free and open without putting her down and be like, even though like sometimes I just want to tell her shut up, like between me, but like, you know, it was really rough. So anyway, I will say, you know, kind of, I could tell 1,000 stories about what happened in my 20s, but the bottom line is it really did affect me, meaning I started feeling out of control. And as a result of that, my marriage started deteriorating. And I'll just be like, I'm very transparent with that because I started becoming, you know, this whole thing, like you got to choose work, family, and then you kind of blend family, but it's really not family. Well, you should be prioritizing your husband and your kids. But as a mother, I didn't realize, but I was really not prioritizing him. I was like all about being a mother. And I'm like, I don't have room to be 3 things. I can probably only be 2 things. So I'll be a mom and an ambitious woman, but being a wife, too hard, too irritating, you know, you annoy me, that whole thing. And that was really happening. And now don't get me wrong, like my ex-husband and I, and we have this kind of like Demi Moore, Bruce Willis thing going on now. I can gladly say that, you know, we're really, really friendly and very much committed to our 2 daughters. And by the way, so we have a second daughter, you know, growing them up. But again, rewinding, I just want to say that, like, I went through, I don't know if any of your listeners can resonate with like that really tough time period where I didn't think I had the option to be good at all 3. I felt like I had to choose 1 or 2 out of the 3. And as a result of that, I tried to throw Band-Aids at it. So like my ex-husband he loves Hawaii. He's from Hawaii too. And if you're from Hawaii, you understand there's this kind of local mentality. And I had this worldly mentality. And I felt like, oh gosh, we're not compatible anymore. But I very much wanted to save my marriage, Nikki. So it's the reason why I live in Hawaii today is this whole story is I literally said, look, I can create my ambition anywhere, but I want to work on my marriage. And so because he was like, I just don't love living here. Maybe if we went back home, maybe we got more help from our family, right? Because, you know, that's also part of it when you're building a Naptime empire is like, you need help, you need support.
Exactly.
And we knew that we could get it more if we lived in Hawaii. And I was like, I'm never going to make any money there, but okay, great. Let's go. We moved back here. And, you know, by a miracle, I'd always say this about my second child, like I get pregnant during this really volatile time in my life. Like we moved back and I'm literally getting on the plane and I find out I'm pregnant with baby number 2. So it was a very interesting time and we moved back to Hawaii and we definitely gave it seriously the good college try. And we stayed together for another 2 years, but we just couldn't make it work. And to be honest with you, I was like, okay, now I'm stuck here. And I will tell you this, I was very committed to my children being around their father because he's a really great dad. And so I said, look, I can create anything. And so I said, the only way I can create something is if I leave my corporate job, which at the time I did get a job as an executive in Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is a big, you know, healthcare company or whatever. And I said that the only way I'm going to be able to do that and basically earn a living and still see the world if I'm an entrepreneur. And that's how entrepreneurship happened to me. So that's kind of like the first phase. And I didn't even get to the second phase, but I just wanted to tell that part of the story because I think there are people like me out there that are probably listening.
Yeah, for sure. So, and we'll just kind of like, we'll just ride through the time machine to go back and forth. So whenever you were in the Bay Area and you were in that corporate, like, how did you balance? Because I know we'll have people listening too who haven't made the leap to entrepreneurship yet and they're thinking about it. But like, how did you make that work, or what were the lessons learned looking back about how to really show up in the way that you wanted to while still, like going hard as an executive, marketing guru in San Francisco?
Yeah, because I was just basically ignorant about motherhood, my mom was a great mom, but she also was a working mom with me. So my only really model for, of course, motherhood is my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother was an entrepreneur. My mother worked for the government. And so I saw two very different ways. But the thing that I got out of them was work ethic, right? So how I handled it while I was in the corporate world was like, okay, I was very structured. So I wanted to have all this control. So when I showed up at work, I was like 100% present. And the only way I could justify feeling totally guilty is for leaving my daughter in or bringing her to daycare. I found the most expensive daycare thinking that's like the best, right? It's like, oh, okay. And look, this was in 1996. I'm really aging myself here. And in 1996, you know how much I paid for daycare? It still boggles my mind that I could afford it because I was still just a junior executive. I wasn't making more than like $40,000 a year, right?
Okay.
And my ex-husband was also making the same amount of money. And we're living in the Bay Area, which was still expensive then. It's still expensive now. I paid $900 a month for her daycare. And that was like crushing for us. That was more expensive than our apartment.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, okay, if I get the most expensive, even though it's going to totally crush us, financially, at least I know my baby's okay. Here's the good news. It was really a great place. And so I've heard other horror stories from people who are like, I pay all this and it's not a great place. I have to say I'm grateful and blessed that it was a very good place, but it hurt every month financially at the time, and all I can say for those of you in the corporate world who are dealing possibly with the same situation where you're kind of balancing like, gosh, should I send my child to daycare? Should I get a sitter? Should one of us basically take 6 months to a year off? Like all those decisions we talked about, and check this out, Nikki, about 6 months in, because it became so financially trying. And frankly, again, we were working on our marriage because there were so many challenges from the money conversations. As we know, a lot of divorces happen because of finances. We were getting so stressed out. We actually went back to our brass tacks, and Barry, his name's Barry, my ex, he said, Jen, what if I took off for 6 months and, watched Michaela or stayed home with her. And then, so that way you could be freed up to just do what you want. Cause Barry will tell you, he wasn't the ambitious type at all. His thing of work is like, I go to work to work. That's it. Like I go to work, I get a paycheck, and that was fine. And I totally respect that. But mine was, my work ethic is such that, you get rewarded for climbing up the ladder. That was my mindset back then, by the way, again. That was my mindset back then. And so actually after 6 months of paying $900 a month and really eating crow and couldn't buy a new car, he quit his job. And the minute he quit his job, it still, unfortunately, didn't work out between us, but I did start rising in my career in the corporate world. I don't regret any of it, because what it allowed me to do is get great mentors, which allowed me the confidence and courage to jump into entrepreneurship. But that hard decision, and I think this is true of whether you're doing great in your marriage or maybe you're even having some challenges, that decision for us as parents really helped. Like it was really good. And again, I can say our daughter is now going to be 20 years old in November. I'm still tripping. Like I can honestly say we're such good parents to her. I mean, to this day, like, she calls me every day. She calls her dad. Like, and even though we didn't get along really, I mean, on certain things and we couldn't make it work, like she always felt taken care of. And so that's my biggest win from that phase. And that also goes with my second daughter as well. Although she came on the tail end of us, separating, she feels very loved too. And that's because we were intentional. And I think that's the key takeaway from my 20s is that if there was anything that I was intentional, that because I chose to be a mother, that I wanted to be the best mom I possibly could while staying happy, because being in the marriage was not making me feel happy. And it wasn't for Barry either, but being their parents make us extremely happy. And so it was that intentionality, I think, that gives me that kind of story. But again, I don't think that, like, I used to really feel guilty. Like, why didn't I just make my marriage work? And I realized that this is exactly how it was supposed to happen, for me. But at the time I thought, oh my gosh, I suck as a wife, but I'm good as a mother and I'm good as an employee, or I was good as an executive, and it was just me not being around the right people, I think, meaning like no one was a negative influence, but I really didn't have anybody to talk to about the marriage stuff, because all I got was, you're a good Asian girl, you should stay married, you should be a good mom, and you should make more money. That's kind of what it was. And I resented that I needed to be the trifecta of all womanhood. Like it really bothered me. And so I rebelled, and the loser in the trifecta became my marriage. So that's kind of how, like the long story too, when you ask like, how did I handle it? I just wanted to make sure my kid was safe and being well taken care of and felt loved. And then I would basically really focus at work and just, basically try to learn from the best. And it was intentional about doing that too. I didn't want to waste my time a lot at work doing things that would just burn my life away, because I knew I had a child at home that I wanted to spend time with. And so I was very intentional, even at work, about aligning myself with the right projects and the right people so that I could learn and contribute more. So
it's all really, and it all relates too, right? Because I think a lot of people then, especially once they then start their businesses, and then they assume it's because they want to be able to be home all the time. And then you quickly learn after you're doing that and you are trying to do both at the same time, and you don't feel intentional about any of it. Instead, you just feel poopy about all of it, because you're like, okay, I'm doing this email, but I'm ignoring you. Okay, I'm playing with you, but then I'm thinking about this email that I need to write or send. And so I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I see a pattern with everybody, regardless of what their support structure and setup looks like, whether it's having someone in the home, hanging out and playing with the little ones while you're working, whether it's actually having an, out of whatever daycare, or you leave and you go to an office or whatever. And there's so much guilt around that, because you feel like, oh no, if I have to have help, then I'm failing because I did this so that I could spend more time. But it's not about quantity alone. It is for me, for sure. I do want to spend more quantity time than I would if I had a job outside of the home, but it really is about quality, because no amount of quantity time, if I'm ignoring them all day, is going to feel good at all. So it's important about finding what works and having those honest conversations with your husband or whoever the other parent and guardian is in the picture, if there is one, about figuring out what works and trying something to see if it works, as opposed to staying in a situation for too long that's not working and then beating yourself up over it,
I just so resonate with that. Mommy guilt is a real thing, and it's a real thing. It doesn't matter how old they are. Back to what you said, this new season of my life, I ended up getting remarried, and I have a 2-year-old son now, and we all live in Hawaii. Well, the oldest is now in college, but, the same thing goes, the guilt hasn't changed. It's how I deal with the guilt and how I react to it that's made my relationship with my husband improve. So I always actually thank Barry for, my husband, Nate, because in so many ways, I learned how to relate better, to your point, Nikki, and not also try to be that perfect trifecta, because the trifecta that I made needing to be perfect, I thought that one had to be the loser in order for, basically, that's kind of like the quantity over quality thing, right? It was like, 2 out of 3 is still winning.
Right.
Right. And now I'm like, no, I want all 3. I'm intentional about all 3. And I also know that all 3, my value of all 3 areas being at 100% is not the same anymore. Like, they don't have to be 100%. It's okay, because on certain days there's going to be imbalance, if you will, right? Because you've got to go, like, this week I'm in the middle of a huge launch. And so, but because I'm better now at communicating, hey babe, just letting you know, October, or, last week of September, beginning month of October is going to be pretty tight for me. Before, I wouldn't even say anything. I would just be like, I'm doing my thing. I'm doing my thing, And so just even doing that level of, it doesn't feel great that they're outside playing in the park right now. Like, they've gone out and taken a walk around the neighborhood. I'd really love to be a part of that. But for me, I did that yesterday. And so I did that with him yesterday, knowing that I can't do it every day, and forgiving myself for it. I think that's because, when things around you aren't working, it really comes back to us, right? It's like, I always tell people, like, in your home or in your business or in your work, leadership of others starts with leadership of yourself. And so in that trifecta that I speak of, notice I didn't say anything about me, but I realized that I'm in the middle of that trifecta. I'm the center. So when I got that, which I didn't get, you guys, I'm a late bloomer in that relationship thing with the husband. I didn't really get that till my 30s. And when I realized, okay, hello, I can be a leader of myself at work and in every other relationship. But it was like in that other relationship, I was like, oh, I thought that was the one that could fade away. And I don't know where I learned that because I didn't learn it from my parents. So that. Yep. But whatever. I mean, bottom line is that center is what matters the most. Because when you start forgiving yourself and going, oh, okay, I can. Oh, this is the other thing I always tell myself. I think the pursuit of everything is jacking us mommies up. Okay. So I always say this now to myself when I'm feeling overwhelming mommy guilt or, even friend guilt or whatever's going on if I'm busy in my business. And it's really like I prioritize the pursuit of anything over the pursuit of everything. I think the pursuit of everything is killing us. But if we choose our anything, the things that are priority, the things that, to use your words, the quality over the quantity. And of course, like you, I'd love to have more time. But when I am with my kids or I am with my husband or even in my business, I'm present wherever I am. And I think that's been huge for me because to me, that's prioritizing anything over everything because everything.
So how do you, what does that look like for you? So, because this is absolutely a common theme that I know we could all work on is being able to forgive ourselves, however the day turns out at the end of the day. And if it wasn't exactly as we had planned, again, that out of control feeling like there's only so much that you can control. And there is a lot to be said. To be fair, I do think that we give away a lot of it and we just tend to slip into victim mode as moms to be like, well, I can't do this because I can't do this because I can't do this because, as opposed to owning the choices. Like, well, actually we can, and it's going to look different than we thought, but we can. It's just a matter of choices. It's going to be a matter of getting more help. Yes, that may cost more money, but we have so many more choices, I guess, than we give ourselves credit for it. But what does it look like for you? And how did you get to that point where you're like, no, I really do. I feel like I'm good about being able to switch gears and be present in whichever one I'm focusing on at the moment and being intentional about it.
I'm going to be really honest. For me, it was a lot of prioritizing self-development activities for myself to get there, Nikki. And I think that a lot of women don't invest in themselves in that kind of way. They always go, and it's not even that they don't. I don't think a lot of women say, I don't need it, although some do. I think it's more like, I don't have time for it. So therefore, I'm going to figure out how to cope in this outside world and basically, quote unquote, suffer for it. But then no one ever looks like, they're suffering because women are great armor bearers of their own family. They're not just mama bears, they're armor bearers. And so for me, how that looks is, I really think that my turning point was 8 years ago. When I say turning point, I always felt like I was a very, again, worldly person. And I always, like to learn a lot about myself and others and blah, blah, blah. But I think that was really like in an ego place and I didn't realize it. But 8 years ago when I got divorced, okay, that was where I was like, most people don't get married to get divorced. And I was really feeling guilty about it. I really felt like I was being selfish and that I was going to screw up my kids. I really had like all these thoughts, and because of my ambition. And I mean, right now, even talking about it, I get so nervous, like people are going to judge me for even my story. Does that make sense?
I'm so glad. Yes. And I am so glad that you're sharing it because again, you are not the only one. And there's going to be someone listening who's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad she said that. And I was feeling the exact same way. So I love that you are sharing your story for that exact reason.
Thank you. And I also I hope those of you who are like, love your husbands, and I did love my husband, but are worried, oh my gosh, if I go do this other thing, it may tear our marriage apart. I'm trying to also talk to you guys too, because I want you to know that, like I said, if I would have 8 years ago done what I did at the end of the relationship, in the beginning of the relationship, I actually think I probably could have repaired it. Now, it always meant to happen how it was supposed to happen. I'm at peace with that now. But 8 years ago, I basically jumped into massive self-development work. And I brought my girls with me. Literally, the kids were, 12 and 8, at the time, Michaela and Jordan. And I said, you know what? We're going to go on this personal development journey together. And mommy has stuff to think about and work on. And, I want you guys to see the journey with me. And so literally I went on these couple personal leadership camps with my kids, and then a couple by myself. And it was, and actually I invited their dad to come to one, which he actually came to, which I was totally surprised. He was not that type.
Right.
He was like, look, if it's, so it really did help me, Nikki, because in 2008, when I had the divorce, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go do this. And that's what I did. And it made me realize that with all the things that I had done to be worldly, what I really needed was just to kind of like unpack and like really get to the heart of like, where was I hurting or feeling like I was being unmet, and dealing with that so that I could show up and be more present. Because the thing was, back to like presence and spending the quality time and prioritizing it, even when the day gets away from you, which it happens still to me, like almost every other day. Okay.
Yep.
Like anything can happen, right? Your Wi-Fi can go down. Mine is actually still down right now. And the thing is that it just made me learn how to have what I call a better bounce back muscle, in terms of like, if stuff flies my way, like I just like, it feels like I'm a ninja now. Like I'm just like, oh, okay. So it kind of scraped my cheek and okay, great. And it grazed me, but no big deal. Like I used to take everything so hard. Like, oh my God, if, you know, I got to my daughter's soccer game 10 minutes late because I was running from an appointment, I used to feel horrible. Now I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm here alive.
Right.
I'm there and cool. I'm cheering on the sidelines. And it's just this whole like not taking stuff so serious, like taking it more like, hey, I really am doing the best I can. And by the way, I hope this doesn't sound judgy, but you really have to be honest with yourself. Are you really doing the best you can? Like, and it's a discernment, right? It's
right.
like, it really is a discernment. It's kind of going, you know, am I resentful that I'm actually at the soccer game, or am I really happy I'm here? And I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy I'm here. Instead of thinking of like the energy or the stress that brought me there, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy I'm here. I'm so grateful I'm here. And so it's that, it sounds really kitschy, but it's just true. Like gratitude and presence, even when there's chaos around you, really help me. Like it's helped me go, oh, it's an awareness. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just being aware and intentional every day, just to go, if I do 2 great things today for me, then everything else is awesome. So like, and it's that simple for me. Because if I made it any more complex than that, Nikki, I would just feel like I got to be a control freak again. And that I just realized if I could do 1 to 2 great things today, and not just at work, by the way, actually just for me. So whatever that looks like, it usually spills over to absolutely my children and my business and my husband, you know. And then the other thing I basically say is like, I prioritize. I learned this from actually, which I didn't listen in my first marriage, from our pastor, who told me, you know, your number 1 relationship now is your husband. And like, I didn't believe in that before. The minute I gave birth to my child, I'm like, she's number 1. Like it's all about her. And I knew, because even though Barry was awesome, like a dad, like I was like, he's not going to ever bring home a lot of money. And that was, I knew that coming in, by the way. So I just want to be clear, guys. I wasn't like, oh, thinking I was going to change him. Right. I really knew that coming in. And that's why I thought, oh, I got to go make the money, which was also fine with me. I love to work, by the way. I really actually enjoy business. Some people like do a business because they think that's going to make them money. I actually love strategy and I love marketing and it just excites me. So I knew that coming in, but I forgot what our pastor had told us before we got married, which was, you know, make your husband your top priority. And I thought, oh, that doesn't sound right. But what I mean by that, what I realize now now I'm 42, but in my 30s, when I had this big aha moment and brought Nathan into my life, it was like, oh, like, you know, if he meets me at 100% him and I meet him at 100% me, then everything will work out. I wasn't at 100%. I didn't realize it, if that makes sense. Like when I say 100%, I'm not talking about effort. I'm talking about like loving me and being okay with me. And so I think for a lot of people probably listening, like it actually works when you go, okay, we're on the same team. Like even when things are stressful, like in business or with the parenthood thing, and we're now a blended family, right? So even that was a somewhat of a challenge, even though he's awesome. Like Nathan is amazing stepfather to my children. My children love him. It still was a weird transition for me to have these 2 older teenagers and then this baby that came and just really rocked our world in both positive and some crazy rocky times as well.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I love what you said about you're focused on worldly. And that's so much what you were thinking about when you were growing up. And then really the answer was like going within and really figuring out you, so that's how you show up in the world. And if everybody would do that, then the whole world would be a better place, because we could all figure out our own stuff to figure out how do we really want to show up and what really lights us up. And I love that you talked about asking yourself and being honest about it. Are you doing the best you can? And it's not to put pressure on, but it's about being honest with ourselves and actually taking that moment to step back, because it's so easy to go through the day on autopilot. So to actually make it a practice doesn't have to be a habit, because it's, some days you're going to forget, but practicing, taking a moment to step back and actually ask like, okay, well, am I really doing it? Because if you're not showing up the way that you want to show up, you're always going to feel that dissonance, and you're always going to feel like this is not in alignment with the values that I know. Like if I'm just literally wasting time and not doing something that's worthwhile in my business, stop it. I'm going to go play with Deacon instead, because I know I'm going to feel better about that. If I'm just resisting and avoiding something, then I know I'll feel better if I actually do that thing. Of course, it takes that mental toughness to actually discipline yourself to do that thing, but at least getting in the practice of asking yourself, and even asking, like you said, the 1 to 2 great things for you, because for so many of us, it's our default setting to want to do well at work. It's our default setting to want to be good moms, good wives, whatever that looks like. That's our default. It's not so much a default to think about like, oh, what are the 1 to 2 things that I can do for me today, regardless of which bucket they fall in. But once you do that and you take care of you, then you will be able to naturally extend that, like once you're in a good place, again, showing up in your own world, like in a better way, as opposed to just thinking about what are the things I have to do today. I like that reframe.
I love that. I love exactly how you put it. That's exactly what I was trying to say. So you were just so good with words.
Well, that is exactly what you said. I just had to recap because I was doodling it over here in my notebook. Okay. So the other thing that I'm curious about, you, and I will have already introed you through your bio and everything, but can you just walk us through, while we're still talking, like the evolution of once you got back to Hawaii, you guys got divorced in 2008, right? And then you started your businesses. And I'm just curious to hear about like the evolution of the brick and mortar to what you're doing today and actually managing multiple empires going on. So
yeah. Well, so actually the timeline looks like this. 2006 is when I decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship. I left my job because we moved back to Hawaii the end of 99, right before Y2K, if any of you guys remember that. And then, so I left the Bay Area at just the right time before it got crazy. And then 6 years went by. I had my corporate job in Hawaii as a online marketing executive for Blue Cross Blue Shield. And then 2006, I basically said, you know what, I'm going to start this business, because being somebody who always notices trends, and I almost have this intuition what's going to happen next in the market. And for me, living in Hawaii, I was like, if I'm going to start a business, I got to start a business where there's a niche to fill, because Hawaii is known as, because it's so geographically isolated, monopolies do really well here. Now, monopolies aren't necessarily, not monopolies in the most traditional sense of illegal, like you're not supposed to have a monopoly, but just basically the first person in here does very, very well. And I knew there was one thing that I was missing, and I think all you mommies will resonate with this, is I could not buy a decent pair of underwear here. Okay, sorry, Nikki is, her husband's in the military, so she has the NEX to go to, so they bring some cute stuff in, but us regular people, no place to buy drawers, okay? No place to buy some cute underwear. And my whole thing was, this is kind of silly. Why do I have to go either to Walmart or Macy's, and also like fight parking? Like Macy's is at our big shopping mall here. This was back again in 2006. I was like, this is crazy. And so it was very simple, Nikki. Like I was like, I need underwear, and I don't want to get a plane to go to California or Las Vegas to buy bras and panties, okay? Which basically was Victoria's Secret. And
Which now they do carry at the necks as well.
Yes. And what's crazy is now they're here. But interestingly, in 2006, Les Wexner, who is the CEO of the Limited Brands and one of my mentors, he doesn't know it, but he totally is. He's the founder of Victoria's Secret. Well, he was actually bought it for $1 million from the guy who started it. And now it's like a $500 million brand. Well, anyway, I read this whole article. I started deep diving research. I said, oh my gosh, I got to open an underwear store. That's how simple it was, Nikki. I was like, I just got to open an underwear store. But of course, being, somebody who's done marketing, in the corporate world, I was like, I got to do my research. I got to figure it out. So I did my research and I realized that, Victoria's Secret considered Hawaii and Alaska international destinations. They even charged the international postage rate if you bought from their catalog, whatever. And so I started poking around, being nosy, and I even called their corporate offices. And I'm like, hey, are you going to ever open a store in Hawaii? And it was crazy because the person I talked to after calling like 4 times said to me, oh, we'll never go to Hawaii because that's overseas and we're an American company. And I was like, I don't know if you know, lady, but Hawaii is like the 50th state of the union, but okay. So I was like, that was my green light to go full accelerator on this retail concept. And okay, again, guys, I never did retail. I worked in retail in college, to make extra cash, but I never started a retail company. But what I knew was that if you're a good marketer and you know how to build brands, that basically can make anything work. Any business can work, in my opinion, if you know marketing and branding. And so I was like, I can make this happen because there's a desire or need in the marketplace. And it wasn't just me, because I was asking all my girlfriends who would come back literally from their trips with these big old pink bags. Victoria, I'm so proud to come and show, like, people, us girls in Hawaii would be like showing off our underwear to each other. Like, look what I brought back, from the mainland. I'm like, why don't you just shop here? So anyway, 2006, to finance this idea, I actually borrowed equity from my house and opened the first store in Honolulu. And Nikki, it's crazy. I mean, I'm really proud to say, like, in less than a year, I never knew how true it was that monopolies in Hawaii work really well, because the first year I wasn't expecting the kind of growth we had. We made in actually 15 months, not 12 months, but 15 months. I'll never forget seeing, like, at that point we had made $7 million in the business, and I had a
so amazing.
It's crazy. Like, I still get goosebumps talking about it because I didn't know. Like, I literally, guys, I went from corporate executive mom going through, and I was going through really rough times still in my marriage. Imagine, like, we were really trying to work on our marriage, right? We were going through counseling, all that. But I was like, okay, cool. So my dream of ambition came true through my first endeavor. And I want to be careful here because I tell a lot of people today, like, there's no such thing as an overnight success. But my first business really felt like that. Like, it was like, oh my gosh. But again, I was right time, right place, right niche, right? And if you can find that, you'll have a shorter journey to starting to make real money. But here's the kicker, guys. So this was 2006. So imagine 15 months later, into the middle of 2007, we started feeling the strains of the economy, right? The Great Recession was upon us. And I literally went from like a kick butt year one to deciding, okay, now people wanted me to open stores on the west side of the island, which over here, that's like the Kapolei side, different points of the island, because I was right in the center of town. And so I took another risk because I figured, okay, great, I'm making money and I'm going to go open 2 more stores. So I signed leases, like 5-year leases with both places that I was planning on expanding on. All of the cash, I had made, a large majority of it I put into the capital infrastructure to build these 2 new stores. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but building out a store, you usually need about $200,000 to $400,000 in capital to build what I call, like, this store was a very lifestyle store. You can imagine this is underwear, right? And so we needed it to be
it's rather lifey,
right? Fabulous, like really beautiful. We definitely, you can open a store for less than what I just said, but and I will tell you this while we're talking around the time, I will never open a retail store again. But okay, but I loved it. And bottom line is, I couldn't have picked, back to like right time, right place, right niche, right? Just about 15 months earlier. Well, wrong time, wrong niche, wrong everything in 2007 going to 2008. It literally, like, think about it, guys. Remember how the car industry just totally, like, basically stopped? I mean, Some car companies went out of business in 2007, like Saturn and other companies, because of the economy. No woman's going to pay $17 for a pair of underwear. We're going to stretch out our bra. We're going to stretch out our underwear during the time when everybody was worried and holding onto their pocketbooks, right? So anybody in that type of, business was hurting. And it's particularly painful if you're still a small business and you don't have investors and cash reserves to sit on. So the bottom line is this: I literally went from seriously balling out, like mega baller empire status, okay, Cookie Lion, if you guys watch Empire on Fox status, to like literally scared for my life, literally scared for my life, because, all my cash reserves were hung up in these contracts. Because, here's the thing, guys, even when the economy is bad, guess what? The bigger companies, frankly, they don't care that much because they're hurting too. And so they're going to try to get their money. That's just business, right? But the small business owner, if not, and no amount of marketing, even though I say marketing is even more important in downtimes, will help if basically just the market is flat. Like literally, who's going to buy panties for $17, which was basically the average cost of how much my underwear cost. Okay. So it was like crazy. So let's just put it this way. December 23rd, 2008, I tried to write it out, Nikki. I was doing everything I could. I was like putting more money into it. I was trying to like create more marketing ideas and just being as creative as possible. And I became very narrow focused, like literally had my blinders on. I didn't see anything around me. And I got to say back to like Naptime empires and being a mommy, that like 15 months of my life, after the 15 months of like huge abundance, like the 15 months after of like literal desperation, I don't think I was a great mom at that time. Meaning it wasn't that back to presence, like I was just so stressed out that I couldn't feed them and couldn't keep them in school and all of that. And I was already separated from my husband. We didn't live together anymore. So we had our own expenses and he had a solid, stable job. And I was the crazy one. And I basically, frankly, we did get into arguments about it because he was like, you basically put everything at risk now because you could have had your old job. And it was crazy. So a bottom line is 2 days before Christmas in 2008, even though I was hustling hard, girl, I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And every week when I would make just a little bit of money, I'd be like, okay, great. I can pay the bills. I can cover stuff, but I had to keep doing IOUs. Like my mortgage started getting behind. It was just crazy. And 2008, December 23rd, I'll never forget. I walked into my bank and, my bank teller knows me. They call me by, my nickname, Jen. And I'll never forget the look on her face. Her name's Jill. I walked in and I said, hey, Jill, I got to, withdraw $200 because I haven't picked up Christmas presents for Michaela and Jordan yet. And I got to go get the bikes at Walmart. I need like $200, $300. And I'm just yapping away because I have all this nervous energy I was living with at the time. Like I felt like totally like a live wire. And she's like, Jen, slow down. And it felt like an Ally McBeal moment. I don't know how old y'all are if you ever watch Ally McBeal, but it was like this out of body like moment where she said to me, you didn't get my voicemail this morning? And I'll never forget. I mean, literally my head felt like it was exploding. Like all I could hear in my head was, no, I didn't get your voicemail because your bank doesn't call you when there's good news. Okay?
Right.
Like, your bank doesn't call you and say, hey, you have more money. Like they usually call you and say, hey, there's an issue we need to resolve, or somebody's trying to steal your identity or something's happening, right? Well, my worst fears came true, like literally because I was so behind just trying to make it happen. And I had tried to stop the leases on these 2 new builds of these 2 new stores. But they basically froze every single dollar in my bank account. And guys, stupid me, and I'll never do this again. I had everything in this one bank. Like I literally had my 2 checking accounts, my business, my personal, all my savings, everything. And when that happens, and if you ever go through a hard time in your business, they can freeze every asset for the time that they're dealing with, like we're resolving. So literally 2 days before Christmas, I had not a penny. And I don't know about you girls, but I'm a debit card / credit card gal. I don't like even carrying change in my purse, just down. So I literally, Nikki, I had no money in my wallet. Like I don't carry cash, and I still am actually still the same way. Except for the time after when I felt like a miser and was hiding money under my bed. Like literally I was for a while after that because of what happened. But basically my money was tied up for 6 months during this litigation, you guys. And because all my money was secured with my real estate, they came after my house. I mean, it was just the most horrible time. And I was in the middle of a divorce. And it was back to when you asked earlier, Nikki, like about what changed me, that was that year, 8 years ago, when I also said the only way I can get through this is to figure out me. And that's when I jumped into personal development. So that's kind of bringing the story all back together again.
Yeah.
And bottom line is, when I emerged from that, that's when I got very clear about presence, about gratitude, about being clear on what I wanted, that ambition could look different from me, and that I needed to put back my feelers on because I was asleep. That's the bottom line. I was living life asleep, even though people saw me as a live wire, excited all the time. And I think that's why the zombie apocalypse is so popular now, Nikki, because like we're living in a sleeping society. And it's up to us to wake up. And I woke up in 2008 and said, this is never going to happen to me again. Like I needed that kind of hit to get it, because I was always overcoming anything. I was like, pinball machine, like any problem, I could fix it. I always had a solution for that. And I just had to be real with, no, I don't have a solution for this. I just need to be with it and decide who I want to be, this next phase of my life. And as a result of that, basically, 4 years later, from 2008, what I did is I went back to my roots, which really was consulting, strategic work. I was like, I really loved helping businesses, and I needed to feed my kids. I had to, I literally had to like live back in, I had to move back in. I lost my house. I had to move back in with my grandmother. And I decided I had to basically hit the streets, if you will, not in that kind of way, ladies, not in that kind of way, but literally kind of knock on people's doors and show them my value. And I realized that when I was a little girl, what did I really love? Being this worldly little girl. I loved to teach. I loved to help people find solutions. I loved business. I really, truly did. And even with losing in the business, I still loved it. That made me know I still love business. Does that make sense? Like I was like, oh, I don't hate this. I'm not scared.
Right.
I'm good at it. I just missed the signs because I was asleep, if that makes sense, to protect my assets, which now that's what I'm all about while I build. And I'm still a risk taker because I know better, if that makes sense. So now, now I have a new business and a new husband and a baby and 2 amazing daughters. And that's the journey I had to go through to get clear on me, if that makes sense.
Well, there's so many nuggets. And when you were first telling me that story, I just thought it's so interesting and so valuable because, as I was saying before we started recording, so many of us have never and will never have the brick and mortar, but there are so many lessons learned from your story about protecting your assets. I saw you mentioning that on a mutual Facebook friend's message the other day, and looking at yourself as an asset in your business, which again ties back to the conversation we were having about like just making sure that you're taking care of you. And so, I mean, obviously we could talk forever, and I'm sure we will again have another like take 2 episode, because there's just so many things, because then we could have you back to talk about your expertise in marketing and branding and making it work, because I really admire that about you. And you're like, you had to get it done, right? Because you were saying you wanted this particular private school for your kids here. That's not cheap. It was like that daycare was just the warm up for what private school in Hawaii would be.
That's right.
And so just the work ethic to just make it work. And I love how you just said, I had to remember this was my value. And to me, that's something that I always told people, regardless of what your business is. In my experience so far, it's about knowing your value, knowing who needs it, and knowing how to communicate your value to the people who need it in a smart, authentic way. So what I would love to wrap with is just, is there anything that we haven't covered that you see as like, okay, look, you out there listening right now, building your empire and raising your little ones, is there any one piece of like, this is a lesson, this is something that I learned that I just want to make sure that I share, so that maybe you can short circuit and you can skip over that one. Just step right on over it and you don't have to trip over it like I did.
I would say that being willing to ask for help and support is probably the one thing that I wish I had done more, and having a tight group of sister friends that you can be honest with and authentic and cry and laugh and forgive yourself. And, even if you have to just spit out like when you're beating yourself up, but just having somebody else to be a mirror of showing you how awesome you really are, because we all will screw up sometimes. We'll all like not show up the way we want to. That's going to happen. But most of the time you're actually doing a great job. And I think that it's the daily just accepting the fact that you are doing okay. It's just that sometimes there isn't anybody to tell you. So I'd say, find 1 or 2 people or a little group of people that you have like-minded interests, you definitely want to be in that space and or that someone's a couple steps ahead of you. And I'm not just talking of definitely not just in business, but just in life, that they've learned some life lessons that can help support you. I'd say that probably I wish I had done that more in my early 20s and 30s, but now it's like air, like it's oxygen for me. That's really helped me still maintain my sanity while I continue to flex and move during my Naptime empires.
Right.
And another thing is, Naptime empires, I was telling Nikki this before, sometimes mommy needs a nap. Let's just put it that way. Okay?
Amen.
You got to build your empire and get rest too. And I think rest is a big thing. It's been a big thing for me. So that's what I would say.
I've been known to literally, like, we've had a babysitter. I'm like, you know what? Today, the best thing I can do is to take a nap. So I'll see y'all in about, even if it's a 30-minute power nap, I'm like, okay, I'll be back. Because there's literally only so much you can do if you're physically exhausted. Well, okay. I love your guts. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Where can everybody find you? Where are some of the places that we can track you down online and find out more about what you are doing to help?
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Spread the word.
Come to my website, www.jenniferkem.com, and that's K-E-M, Jennifer Kem. And I also have a really cool Facebook group. If you want to pop in there, it's called the Paid to Be You Posse. So for those of you Naptime Empire ladies who really are interested in learning how to build a business, you can pop in there if that's of interest to you. But I also talk a lot about just what's up and what may be getting in the way, both in life and business too, because I think success is an inside game in anything. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can just look it up, Paid to Be You Posse, and it'll pop up and you can join.
All right, sweet. Yes. And we will definitely link that up in the show notes to make it super easy. So head on over to Naptime Empires. We will link that up. And Jen, thank you again so much. This has been fabulous. And I know that your story is going to serve so many. So thank you again for sharing it.
Thank you for having me, Nikki. Anytime. I love talking to you.
Likewise. This show may be over, but the conversation is just beginning. Head on over to naptimeempires.com/Facebook so you can join my free... Wait, did I say free? I meant priceless, rapidly growing community of Naptime Empire builders for deeper discussions, behind-the-scenes scoop, and of course, updates whenever I've got new stuff coming up for you. naptimeempires.com/Facebook. See you there.
See you next time. Thanks for listening.